All the talk at the moment is about Benjamin Sesko and how much he's going to cost Arsenal Football Club should they decide to move forward and sign him this summer. We're going to bring you some up-to-date information around that and more on today's episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Let's get into it. Hey everybody, how are we doing? Happy Saturday. Welcome to another episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. The sun is shining. I should be feeling really good about today, but I can't help but feel a little bit down in the dumps. Nothing to do with transfer business, nothing to do with anything like that. Just waking up this morning and scrolling through social media and seeing so many of my friends and colleagues working out in Munich, covering tonight's UEFA Champions League final between Inter and PSG. It breaks my heart that we're not there. And we really ought to have been. You know, I know PSG were fantastic and they're deserved finalists, as are Inter, but you just feel like if things had gone a little bit better for us in terms of the rub of the green, we might have been there and we could be gearing up for a historic night and what could potentially be a really special night in the club's history. Instead, we're sat at home in London, and yeah, we're going to be watching from afar, which is disappointing. I can't help but feel that way. And you know, the way to do it, I think, and the good thing is that hopefully, you know, that pain that I'm feeling, I can only imagine that it's more pain for the players and for the manager and for all of those that were involved and really did kind of, you know, put their blood, sweat, and tears into that Champions League campaign. Hopefully, it's the kind of thing that they can channel into positive energy going into the new campaign, and maybe we'll be there this time next year. Who knows? But I had to get that in there because I'd be lying if I didn't wake up this morning, scroll through social media, and then feel this real kind of sinking feeling. Why aren't we there? We should be there. We should have been there this year. It hasn't happened, but yeah, we'll move on. And hopefully, as I say, we can use that as fuel, as motivation going forward and into the new campaign. Right, what we're going to talk about on today's pod, we're going to talk about Benjamin Sesko, and we're going to talk about the price at which Arsenal should be able to sign the player for. Now, I have said, and I've been quite strong in saying over the last couple of days, that reports of £93 million as a transfer fee, well wide of the mark. I said that the only thing I could think of was that, you know, people were sort of adding the transfer fee plus maybe the player's salary over the 5-year contract that we're expected to give him if we do this deal. And they were adding all of those things up, maybe some agent fees, maybe a signing on fee, who knows, and essentially blowing it up into this huge and ridiculous figure of £93 million. Now, I'm not saying that Benjamin Sesko over the course of a 5-year contract, if that's what we give him, won't cost that or close to that. But people took it as though that's a £93 million transfer fee. And I think we've been discussing quite a bit about, you know, the reaction to this news. The reaction to Arsenal opening talks with RB Leipzig has been generally quite negative. And that surprised me a little bit. But I do think a part of that was created by this idea of Arsenal sort of really crazily overpaying for this player. And if you're hearing £93 million, you think that's the transfer fee. And you're looking at someone like Victor Gyökeres, who's got a much better goal scoring record and who I still believe is probably the guy for now. You're looking at that and you're going, well, if he's available for 60, why on earth are we going to go and pay an additional 33 million quid to go and get Benjamin Sesko in? But let me just reiterate this point one more time. Arsenal are not going to pay anything near, anything close to £93 million as a transfer fee to RB Leipzig for Benjamin Sesko. Of that, I am certain. We'll get into the details. We'll get into the ins and outs on today's pod. Let me say a few hellos, though, to people joining us in the chat. We've got Granddaddy Gooner. John is with us. The Saxon joins us. Goonerverse, Wesbird. We have got Gooner Oz joining us from Jakarta. We've got Osuo. We've got Anthony. We have got Rumble, AFC Till I Die. So many of you. Look, I'm not going to go through everybody because I'll just end up reading names off for the next half an hour. But yeah, appreciate the love, appreciate the support, and thank you to Tom Osborne, who has gifted one YouTube channel membership to somebody in the chat. So thank you so much for that, mate. Really, really do appreciate it. Lots of hellos, lots of good mornings. And yeah, thank you all for being here. But look, let's get into the crux of what we're going to discuss today. So I've been doing a little bit of digging on this transfer fee thing. And obviously, you guys know me, right? I'm not the guy that goes, I'm in the know and I know everything. So if I do, on the odd occasion, come forward and say, here's some information, you can bet that I'm pretty certain that it's accurate, and you can bet that I've got it from a really, really good and strong source. Yes, by trade, I'm a journalist, but I'm more of a broadcaster than a journalist. I'm not a journalist that produces a lot of news, that gets exclusive stories. Generally speaking, I am someone whose career is based mainly around providing opinions and commentary. But from time to time, I get to speak to people within the game, and I got to speak to someone within the game yesterday who has a real connection to this. I don't want to reveal too much because obviously I don't want to give the person away. I don't want to give the source away. But let's not go into the ins and outs of that, so I don't say anything I shouldn't. But basically, from what I've been told, at the start of this sort of window, if you like, or going into this window, come around April, May time, when it became a point for everybody really to start obviously wanting to wrap up their seasons and achieve whatever it was that they were on course to and in line to achieve. But towards the end of the season, RB Leipzig had decided as a football club that they were looking for something between 65 and 70 million pounds, not euros, pounds, for Benjamin Sesko. Now, it was said to me that RB Leipzig are so certain that Arsenal are the club that Benjamin Sesko is going to end up at, that they were putting together prices and packages in pounds because they weren't anticipating interest to that level from anybody else on the continent. Arsenal have been there in the last two windows, knocking on the door, asking the questions, and trying to figure out a way of getting Benjamin Sesko from Leipzig to London. So this is a deal that, okay, it's going to begin being negotiated now, but it is a deal that has been on the cards. RB Leipzig going into this summer knew that Arsenal were going to come back in for Benjamin Sesko. And so a lot of work has been done internally at the German club to figure out what they think is a fair valuation for the player, knowing what they know in terms of the conversations and discussions they've had with Arsenal previously, knowing how much Arsenal want the player, etc., etc. All of that has been discussed. And going into the summer, so coming up towards the back end of the season, it was said that RB Leipzig have come to a decision internally that something between 65 and 70 million pounds, not euros, is what they are looking for. Now, that's a big difference, right? Even if you take the top end of that, 70 million pounds, that is 23 million pounds short of the price that was being banded around. That's 23 million pounds short of the 93 million pound figure that was being circulated. That's where RB Leipzig are at in terms of what they want. However, should they not like the terms in which Arsenal want to structure this deal, they will look for slightly more. But we're still not going to get anywhere near the 93 million pound mark. Okay, so let me just reiterate that for clarity. Going into this summer, RB Leipzig are looking for something between 65 and 70 million pounds. The player does have a release clause of around about 80 million euros based on some conditions that we heard about. 80 million euros in pounds is 67.4 million pounds on today's exchange rate. Okay, so we're in a place where, you know, we know quite clearly what it is that RB Leipzig are looking for. There's going to be a little bit of wiggle room, surely. You know, can we get closer to the 65 million mark? I'm sure that's what Arsenal will be looking to do. RB Leipzig will look to try and get the top end. Of course they will. But that's the information I have. It's not too different from some of the information that we've gone over before. So I'm not claiming this is some, huge breakthrough in terms of the news, but I had it confirmed by a very, very good source, somebody who's very, very involved in this type of deal, who has connections with that football club, having dealt with them on many occasions. And it was said to him, and it was passed on, that RB Leipzig want that figure. That's what they're looking for. Now, if Arsenal, excuse my language, take the piss with the structure of the deal, i.e. Arsenal come along and say, okay, but we want to pay that over 4 or 5 years, RB Leipzig are within their rights to dig their heels in and demand a little bit more. There is, from what I understand, there is in that release clause, there is a very clear breakdown of how that money needs to be paid. And so what that means is that you can't trigger that release clause without meeting those structural conditions. So you can't meet that release clause by, paying it over 5 years. They've got very clear parameters around how they want that money to be paid. And only if you meet those parameters will you be able to get the player for that price without the need to negotiate further. So let's see. Tom Hines says, how good is the sauce, Harry? We're talking Heinz tomato ketchup, Nando's Peronaise, or Aldi Mayo. Aldi Mayo, really? I've not tried that. Nando's Peronaise is good. Heinz tomato ketchup, you can't beat it, can you? It's better than all the other tomato ketchups. Not that I'm a big ketchup fan, but you know where I'm going with this. Anyway, look, as I say to you, I don't do this often. I don't sit here very often and say, I've got a bit of exclusive information, blah, blah, blah. I don't do it very often. So when I do, I probably do it once a year. It's because I've had a conversation that I think was very interesting, and I've got some really, really good insight. And, I'm really confident in what I'm saying here. That's what they're looking for. Can we get it done sort of sooner rather than later? Hopefully, because obviously we all want him to be available for pre-season. We all think that that's really, really important. RB Leipzig want to move Benjamin Sesko on now. The players expressed a desire to move on. They want a quick sale. They want a quick resolution because they want to start looking at replacing him and doing the business that they need so they can get themselves back into the Champions League, which is where they want to be. So there's a willingness and an openness on all sides to do this. But I guess where we're going to be stuck is, there's probably going to be a period of time now where both clubs are just having a bit of a tug of war in order to try and get the best possible deal for themselves. But Arsenal know what they need to do to get Benjamin Sesko. RB Leipzig know what they want. It's just a case of, how close to the middle can the negotiations lead these two clubs, by which both teams walk away and say, "Yep, you know what, we're satisfied with that, and we'll take it." So yeah, that's it. Let's see where this goes and where this leads. I know people in the chat saying, "Well, but that's still a lot of money." Listen, I'm not saying that it isn't a lot of money. I think if you look at it surface level and you go, he scored 13 goals last season, and then you think about the fact that we're probably going to have to pay close to, if not 70 million pounds to get him, I understand why there's questions. I've said all along that I understand why people prefer Victor Gyökeres and why people think that Victor Gyökeres is the better solution. I'm not shitting on that opinion by any means. Like, if that's your view, no problem. Even me, if you asked me to pick one, if you told me, here's the money, Harry, you go and sign the one that you think gives Arsenal the greatest chance of achieving what they want this season, I go and sign Victor Gyökeres right now. But as I mentioned yesterday, Arsenal clearly really do believe in this player, and they've been there. They've been at the door. They've been knocking on that door for a good 2-3 windows now. So I think they desperately want to get this done now. I think it's something that they're really invested in, the idea of Benjamin Sesko, that is. And now they have to invest financially to secure that deal and make it happen. So only time's going to tell. But I just wanted to sort of clarify what I believe to be the asking price, because I think in a lot of the negativity that we've seen in response to this kind of news that Arsenal are sort of moving forward with this and having conversations with RB Leipzig, I think a lot of that has been amplified by what people believe to be a ridiculous figure. Now, I'm not saying 70 million is fine. I still think we're paying over the odds, but it's a lot better, isn't it, than 93? It's 23 million pounds less. So it's quite a big difference. So I felt it worth getting that out there. Let's get you guys' thoughts and your questions from the live chat as well. Anthony says, Sporting have rejected Arsenal's 70 million euro offer for Victor Gyökeres, according to Correo de Mania. Look, I'm not sure about that as a source. And that's where I've got some reservations around some of the Gyökeres reporting recently. I was doing a show on TalkSport 2 yesterday, and one of the segments we do is a betting segment with William Hill, who sponsored the show. And I asked the representative, Alex Dunn, yesterday, what do the odds look like for Arsenal to sign Benjamin Sesko? What do the odds look like for Arsenal to sign Victor Gyökeres? And it's very rare that the bookmakers are a long way off. That's why they're in business, right? That's why they're raking in what they rake in. And he said we were favourites to sign both Gyökeres and Sesko. I mean, I'm just throwing it out there. Is there a chance that we try and do both bits of business? I don't know. I never thought it was likely or even maybe possible before, but I'm starting to wonder a little bit now about whether that's perhaps potentially a possibility. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, 70 million euros translates to about 59 million pounds. So you're talking about 10 million quid less for a player that's probably more ready and more ripe, if you like. But we'll see. I know. Look, I know that's going to frustrate people because they're going to say, well, if you can get him for 60 million quid, why on earth aren't you doing that deal? Yeah, why on earth aren't you doing that deal? It's a debate. And it's a good debate, and it's one that I'm willing to entertain, of course. But what I don't want to do, guys, I don't want to write off someone. I don't want to write someone off before they've even come in. I don't want to look at Benjamin Sesko and be underwhelmed and disappointed. Like, I've got my view. I've had my views before. My views have not always been right. Nobody's always right. And because I think we've generally done really good business, and because I think we've done under Mikel Arteta and in recent years, that is certainly with the bigger deals that we've done, I'm willing to defer to the pros and to the experts. And, I might come back 6 months down the line and say, what on earth have we done here? That was a big mistake. But for now, I don't think it's worth getting your knickers in a twist over. He might come in and be brilliant. Who knows? Who knows? Let's take some of your thoughts and some of your questions then from the live chat. But if you haven't done so already, guys, please leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you are brand new as well. We're on our way towards 41,000 subscribers now, which is remarkable when you think about the fact we only hit 40 the other day. So we're growing really, really quickly. We've had a record-breaking month in terms of views and downloads on audio as well. So thank you for your amazing support. And remember, if you fancy going one further, you can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/The Chronicles of Aguna. The link is in the description below. But likes don't cost a thing. They're completely free. So if you haven't done so already, leave a like on the video, guys. It really, really does help. In fact, we check out where we're at on them right now. We got over 100, but we got to 1,000 likes yesterday. So I want to get to 1,000 likes again on today's video. I'll be very, very chuffed if we could manage that. Okay, let's go into the live chat then. Let's take some of your questions. Let's take some of your thoughts. Okay. James Butler says, I've been of the opinion we will sign both, to be honest, and won't get Sane on a free as a winger. I'd like to think that we could potentially get both, but I just think it's a really big financial outlay that I don't think Arsenal can afford to make, given that there are multiple other positions that we need to address. I mean, we've already spent 60 million basically on Martin Zubimendi, right? So that's already basically done. So that's that money gone. Then if we go and get a Sesko, which looks the more likely at the moment, you're talking about 70 million quid. You're talking 130. Probably need to bring in, I don't know, a goalkeeper, maybe one more midfielder, because we don't know what's happening with Thomas Partey yet. Definitely need a left winger, in my opinion, and a left winger is going to cost a fair chunk, isn't he? Like, if you're talking about Rodrigo, if that's the bar, if that's the standard, then you're going to end up paying a hell of a lot of money for him. I don't know. I can't see it. Like, I wouldn't rule it out. And it's interesting that there are reports at the moment that we're in talks with RB Leipzig, but also that we're having bids knocked back for Victor Gyökeres. It's interesting, but I'm not sure how much I want to read into those Gyökeres reports, especially. Thank you for the super chats coming through, by the way. Bilal Hussein talking absolute nonsense in the live chat, but sending super chats in. So, yeah, thank you for your kind donations to the channel, but I will not be reading those out. Junior Gunner says, the last two big money forwards from Leipzig that preceded Sesko were Nkunku and Timo Werner. Are you honestly confident this is going to be a hit? Yeah, but can you really judge Benjamin Sesko based on what Nkunku and Werner have done? Like, that's unfair, isn't it? That's really, really unfair. You know, that's like when Ethan Nwaneri was coming through, going, yeah, but do you know what? Maitland-Niles didn't turn out to be that great, did he? Or, yeah, maybe that's a bit harsh. Maitland-Niles has gone on to have a decent career, but, you know, it's like picking out another youth player and going, well, he didn't exactly pull up trees, so that means Ethan Nwaneri can't be any good. I don't know. I don't really subscribe to that idea. Like, I understand people's reservations about Sesko. I always have from the beginning of this conversation, throughout the week when we've been discussing it. I've always had a sympathy for that opinion because it's an opinion that in a lot of ways I share. But at the same time, I think I've made peace with it over the last few days and gone, right, fine. In my head, there wasn't a huge gap between Gyökeres and Sesko, but I did clearly have a preference. And now I look at it and I go, okay, my preference isn't the one that it seems Arsenal are moving towards. Let's see what happens before I start throwing my hands up and down and shouting and effing and blinding and all the rest of it. Let's see what happens. Let's see where we end up. Temi says, would you accept Sesko if we sign a world-class left winger like Rodrigo? I'm accepting Sesko anyway. Like, I'm accepting him anyway because it's not... Look, the fact that Arsenal have been there in this conversation, waiting for this player now for the best part of a year, as far as we know, it might even be longer. That's got to give you some encouragement that throughout this time, they've been watching the player, they've been tracking his development, and their interest has been unwavered. Their interest continues. Their interest still exists. It must exist for a reason because they could have quite easily pivoted away. And we're talking about Gyökeres being available, who a lot of people believe is a better solution. Well, you could easily pivot to him and probably get the deal done for the same price. But there seems to be a real willingness on Arsenal's side to move forward with this. And so at this stage, I'm going to say, okay, let's see what happens. Baron White says, I feel like the criticism towards Sesko is a bit unfair, Harry. Clearly, the recruitment team and Arteta see qualities in Sesko that we don't agree. Lloyd Kambule on Correia da Manhã says, is one of the oldest news outlets in Portugal. It's a reliable news source in Portugal. Right or wrong, we'll never know. But it's the same with Romano and all the rest of them. Yeah, look, all of them are reports at this stage, and we've got to be careful for sure. But, I mean, if I said to someone, what's the most famous newspaper they think in England, they'd probably tell me maybe The Sun. That doesn't mean I'm going to trust everything The Sun says. Do you know what I mean? I get what you're saying, and I get where you're coming from, but I just think we got to be really, really careful with taking reports from sources that we ourselves don't know to be great for gospel. Like if David Ornstein says it, you know, he could get things wrong as well. He has got things wrong in the past. Everybody gets things wrong. But if someone like David Ornstein puts that out, then you go, okay, the chances of this being accurate are very, very high because he's got that track record. I can't speak to their track record, therefore I can't say yes. Let's all get on board with what they're saying. What else have we got in the chat? Anthony says, Harry, it doesn't make sense for us to be bidding for Gyökeres if Sesko is our number one target. Yeah, that's what I mean. I'm not sure about that report. And I'm not sure about that story. Jerry says, well done, Harry. This is a semi-exclusive, and this is impressive. Different from people regurgitating David Ornstein and Fabrizio Romano. Look, I'll give you guys a little bit more Obviously, look, if you're working in journalism, and any journalist will tell you, there are some sources that don't mind going on record, and there are others that don't. So I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus, but I've spoken to someone who works within the world of football agents and who's got a very strong connection to RB Leipzig based on some previous deals, and who has told me that going into the summer, that is what they were after. Now, has that price point moved or changed? I couldn't tell you. But as of the end of the season, this is what RB Leipzig were looking for, 65 to 70 million pounds. Now, I also said that he told me that if the structure doesn't suit them, they will try and get a little bit more and they will push for the release clause. But even the release clause, it needs to be met with a certain structure. You can't say, here's the release clause of 80 million euros, but we're going to pay it over 5 years. RB Leipzig would not be obliged in that situation to accept your offer. The only way they would be obliged to accept your offer is if the structure of those payments is in line with what that release clause clearly states. Does that make sense? So a release clause is a figure, right? But like, for example, in Spain, okay, let's talk Martin Zubimendi for a minute. He's got a very, very clear release clause. And the only way that the club are 100% legally obliged to accept that offer is if you go to La Liga and you say, for instance, it's 60 million euros. You go, here's the 60 million euros all in one go, bang, deposited the money on the table. You own the registration of the player, not the club. Now you have to let us proceed and move forward with the legal transfer. If you are going in trying to sign these players and you're wanting to do deals based on staggered payments and terms that are more suitable to you, then you have to accept that the club are not in a position where legally they have to accept your offer. So release clauses very clearly in a lot of cases stipulate what that payment structure needs to look like in order for that to be a legal triggering of the release clause. So that's where we're at. I'm just laughing at some of the comments in the chat. James Butler, Zubimendi, 51 million. Yeah, 60 million euros is what it's quoted in that particular currency. Carrie says, would you take Ollie Watkins if he was cheaper and then buy a better winger? Sesko scored 13 goals and wouldn't be in the top 10 in the Premier League. I would have taken Ollie Watkins in January. I didn't think 40 million quid was a ridiculous amount, to be honest. I know that's what Villa wanted and Arsenal didn't want to pay it because of his age and all the rest of it. But I didn't think that was a particularly unreasonable demand from Aston Villa at that point. Clearly, if Arsenal are prioritizing Sesko over Gyökeres, they're looking at age. They're looking at that as a big factor. In which case, if you're going to turn your nose up at a 27, 28-year-old in Victor Gyökeres, how can you justify going and signing Ollie Watkins for only marginally less money than probably what you'd pay for Victor Gyökeres? So, yeah, I would have taken Ollie Watkins in January. Not sure I would now. But that was because we were in a desperate position in January. It's not to say he's a bad player and you should only sign him if you're desperate, but you get what I mean. You get what I mean. Guys, quick reminder, if you haven't done so already, please leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new. We want to get to 1,000 likes, but we're nowhere near it at the minute, so we need some real hard work from you guys. Yep, it's really, really hard, guys. I'm so sorry. Just roll your mouse over to the right, or if you're watching on an iPhone or something else, just tap your finger on the like button. I know it's a lot to ask, but it really, really does help. It's completely free as well. Fantastic. 88 miles per hour says it's easier to negotiate when the season is finished. Absolutely. And I think when you get to the point where you realize that they're not budging in a January window, as I mentioned the other day, you kind of just have to back off and go again in the summer. And Arsenal obviously felt that this is a player who, who could really benefit us and could be a solution for us for many, many years to come. And so as a result of that, they were willing to just hold fire, keep their powder dry and go again in the summer. And here we are. But now you have to get this deal done, don't you? You have to get the deal done for a striker. Tom says, Harry, did you see Scott Willis's post, the ELO chart, where other than the top three in Portugal, most of the teams in the Portuguese top flight are worse than the Championship. I didn't see the post, but I'm tempted to agree with that without even seeing the post. And I'll explain a little bit about why. In the past, I used to work with a betting company over in the States when I first changed careers and I didn't have enough Arsenal related work and football related work. I was very, very lucky to be given the opportunity to work with Bet Rivers in the US. And with the brilliant Nigel Seeley, massive thanks to him because he gave me lots of opportunities, and that really kind of helped me to kind of keep supporting the family while I was building up to establish the career that I wanted. And one of the tasks I had at Bet Rivers was to host some of their betting podcasts going into the weekends. And I used to host their Premier League show, which was obviously great fun. And the guys would give you tips and give you bets for the weekend. And then we'd monitor how they did and we'd show you the results and we'd have a good old laugh as well. It was fantastic. But I also hosted the Portuguese League show with a very, very good friend of mine now, Carlos, who was very, very in the know with Portuguese football. And so we used to talk about Portuguese football every single Friday. We used to sit down and record this podcast. He'd provide his insights. And we had so many conversations off air. We'd sit down to record for half an hour and we'd end up being on Zoom for sometimes 2 hours because we were chatting about it and chatting through it. And I really did get the impression that the Portuguese league, outside of the power three, Benfica, Porto, and Sporting, is really, really weak at the moment. And so when people were expressing concerns the other day about Benjamin Sesko and, you know, really kind of highlighting the numbers point in terms of how many goals Victor Gyökeres has scored, comparatively speaking, to the Slovenian, the thing I pushed back with quite a bit was, okay, but the Portuguese league is not the best league in the world. In fact, it's nowhere near it. And it is significantly weaker than the Bundesliga. So even though I still look at Gyökeres and go, probably would have gambled on you, I appreciate that the gap is smaller than some people would have you believe. It has to be, because one is playing in a significantly weaker league, in a team that are like Sporting are way more dominant in Portugal than Leipzig are in Germany. So that has to be factored in as well. There's a lot to factor in. That's why analysis has to be a little bit deeper. Chris says, at the end of the day, none of us have done as much research into Sesko as the club, and they will make the decision they think is best. Just trust your team and support them. Simple. Yeah. There's a good way of summing it up. Nathan says, the best thing is we don't know anything about what's going on behind the scenes. Absolutely hilarious watching people get angry over nothing. It's the way of the world now, mate. People are so angry all the time. Tizer says, Harry, if we're going for Sesko, is it not a mistake that we didn't agree a deal last summer and loan him back? So he came this summer. The price would have been lower. Same with Garcia. I don't know. I don't know that was doable or possible. And again, this is where, you know, we're living in this world where we just believe that anything is doable, and we judge really, really kind of hastily, I think, on stuff that we just don't have the knowledge to know whether it was even possible. Like, how do we know that RB Leipzig were even willing to come to the table last summer? We read in Fabrizio Romano's report that we inquired last May, and we were told categorically no. We then went back in January and we were told categorically no. But the door was left open for the summer. We don't know that RB Leipzig wanted to sell last summer to be able to have agreed this deal in advance, as you're suggesting. And we don't know that Benjamin Sesko would have been wanting to move on at that point either. Sometimes it just doesn't work. Sometimes, you know, you're needing, and I always say this with a transfer, right? There's so many pieces to it. So to do a deal of this value, you need the two clubs to be on board, right? So that's two people. You need the player. You need the players' representatives. You need all the lawyers. You need agents on both sides. You need medical staff. There's so many places in which a potential transfer can fall down. You need people negotiating. When I say agents on both sides, I mean, you know, sometimes you'll get an agent obviously representing the player that you're trying to buy, but a lot of the time you'll get an intermediary in there as well. This is something that a lot of people overlook. For example, do you remember when we went through that phase of buying players via Kia Jurabshan? Now, it wasn't great. It didn't work out very well and all the rest of it. But the reason I highlight two agents is because in those instances, Kia Jurabshan was making the introduction. What, you telling me he wasn't taking a piece of the pie? Of course he was. So that's another potential obstacle, another potential stumbling block in your negotiation process. So to just say, oh, we should have done the deal last summer, come on. Like, it's what we could have done in an ideal world, but we don't live in an ideal world. And to believe that was on the cards, I think is a little bit naive, because we just don't know that, guys. We just don't know that. Okay, should we take one or two more before we sign out for today? Tizer does make a really good point in the chat. He says, laughable that the same Arsenal fans who were pissed off we didn't sign Isak from Real Sociedad, even though he had a worse record at that time, at that age, are now sort of annoyed that we're seemingly trying to move forward with this. Ruak says, my personal opinion, most fans want Gyökeres because it's harder for rivals to banter that signing. Only for sure strikers in terms of producing would have been Isak or Alvarez. Yeah, I kind of agree that those two are in the bracket above for sure. Stephen D'Souza says, why are Liverpool, City, Chelsea, Barcelona and Bayern not interested in Sesko if he's going to be the next big striker? Well, if we've already expressed an interest in the past, and if those reports where it says we're already sort of in a place where personal terms are agreed, then maybe they know that and they're not going anywhere near. I don't know, but look, it's about what do those clubs need at that time as well. Like, City ain't going to go in when they've just bought Omar Marmoush and they've got Erling Haaland. Why would they be interested? Barcelona have got Robert Lewandowski at the club. Bayern Munich have got Harry Kane. Liverpool, you could argue, could do with another centre forward, but they probably need to move on a Darwin Nunez or a Jota first. Chelsea could do with one, but they're moving for I nearly said Rory Delap, for Liam Delap. Like, it's just not a need for all of those clubs right now, is it? And that's that's the reality of the situation. Right, I'm going to take one more, I think. I beg your pardon. Did I get to the mute button before I sneezed? I hope I did. Let me take one more. Let me take one more from the live chat. And then we'll sign out for today. Don Mario says, as a club, we're so slow at doing things. It's so frustrating. Come on, man. The window's not like, I don't know how to even respond to these comments. Like, I'm getting so many of them at the minute. How impatient are people? Jesus Christ. The window isn't open. The window is not open. But you expect every deal to be done and wrapped up by now. I don't get it. I just don't get it. I really don't understand it. I don't understand why people are so agitated at this stage. Look, if the window opens and we're 3-4 weeks in, considering we've been hearing that we've been working on stuff for ages, then we'll have a conversation about it. But the window's not even open, and people are losing their minds about the speed at which we're operating. Michael, thank you so much for your super chat. Really, really do appreciate it, mate. He says, it's important to note Sesko plays in a mid-table German side in a two-striker system where he's the facilitator for Openda. If we platform him properly, I could easily see that goal tally of 13 increase. Yeah, it's a really, really good point. And that's really, really good, helpful and interesting context around sort of his current output. So thank you so much for that, Michael. Really appreciate it. Right. Just one more plug. Like the videos if you haven't done so already. Subscribe to the channel, all the rest of it. Sign up on Patreon if you like. Leave us a review for listening on Apple or Spotify, all the rest of it. I'm going to leave it for today. Just to reiterate the information at the beginning. It is my understanding that RB Leipzig going into this summer had it planned out that they were looking for 65 to 70 million pounds for Benjamin Sesko. Could that figure change based on the structure of the deal? Of course it could, but that was the figure that RB Leipzig were going into the summer with in mind. So I'd imagine that if we're going to get this deal done, we're not going to deviate too far away from that. 70 million feels like the ceiling. in terms of what we will be willing as a football club to pay. I don't think we should pay more than that, to be honest with you. I think you could argue that even that is a little bit over the top. But hey, if you really want that player, if you really believe that that player is the one, then that's what you do, and that's what you got to execute, I suppose. Thank you all so much for joining me on today's episode. Happy Saturday. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll be back tomorrow with more. Until then, take care of yourselves. All the best. Up the Arsenal.